Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Wesley the Writer. I am Wesley, and it's been a while since episode 4. I spent a little bit of time getting my life right. I guess you could say that, but in all honesty, it was really just I was procrastinating, and I was also working on some other things, mostly pertaining to my daily life. So, with that said, we're going to get back into the flow of things, and I wanted to jump into talking about genre. Um, I know that developmental writing keeps us bound to these structures of how to write, and one of the more important things that I think every early writer needs to understand is that we typically want to focus on getting the story out, not focus on the exact idioms of the day. So, we're going to talk about the presumptions and pretensions of storytelling. We're going to talk about an example of defining storytelling for a genre and why no way is the right way. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so let's get a base understanding of genre and storytelling. Genre is a convention by which story is familiarly digested. That's for your audience, that's not for you. And genre isn't defined by tropes, it's a characterization or categorization only. You're only allowing your work to be put into a genre once you've finished writing it. For me, what I do is I focus on character interactions first. What is it that they're going to be doing with each other? Where are they going to be going? What's the location? What's the world like in this location? What's the dichotomy? What is the economy? Whatever you want to, however little small, minute detail you want to get into it. World build first. That's what I'm trying to get at. You want to build your world first, then you want to build your character and his relationship in the world. Then you want to work on your character's interactions with other characters. And as you build your story in that way, you'll notice that your story will come together. The beats, the actions that happen in between those interactions, that can be what defines ultimately the genre. That's what the audience will identify with. But as far as writing, you want to focus on just those elements first, those beginning parts of the story. What does subject matter mean, really? When I say subject matter, I mean those parts. I'm talking about those parts of building up the relationships between the character, their environments, and other characters in your story, and ultimately reaching their conclusions through the story arcs and through your acts and all of that. So you want to make sure that your story is actually saying something, and it's not just saying something random, or it's not saying something by just it being a complete action throwaway. Now, it could be that. Hardcore Henry was an example of that, but Hardcore Henry actually did have decent world building and a decent story. What I mean is a story like Hardcore Henry, but without the story. You don't want just action sequences, because then it's just a slideshow of carnage. And I mean, that might be cool for a YouTube video, but that's not going to be cool for a movie. Another question pertaining to subject matter is, what do you want your audience to feel? Now, when you have an audience and they're interested in whatever it is you have on your paper and it gets put to screen, you want them to feel something. You don't want them to just look at this character go through all of this stuff for no particular reason And you would think that genre would help drive the emotions that you want to feel that part of the story, but it's not going to do that. Again, genre is just a classification. It's not a explanation. And you definitely want to focus on your explanations of why your character is in the situation that they're in. Why did he make this one character cry? How did he make them cry? And so on and so forth. Why is the government attacking your character? And you see, when you build a story in that way, it takes a little bit of work, but you end up with a story that actually is saying something. It's not just, you know, oh, this character is super powerful in this scene, and then this character is super weak in this scene. And between those 2 points, the only explanation we got was a look from another character and a sideways glance or something like that. And now, boom, your character. That's just complete. That's completely butchering a character. You don't want to do that. I think that the question should be asked. In what way can your story actually help someone, or how can it hurt someone? And that could be overreaching. I'm pretty sure this entire podcast is overreaching, but that could be, in a sense, how you tell your story. What's the end goal here? What are you, aside from what you want your audience to feel, how are you helping them in your story? Or rather, how are you hurting the narrative of someone else in the world? Because there are movies and documentaries that, are against social ideals and stuff like that. And that's fine, but you have to understand what your whole story is about. Genre doesn't help you with that. It can put it in the was it the sci-fi drama section or whatever, but if your story is trying to upheave the patriarchy, that's not something that you can just place in a genre. And that's important to understand. What's really important to understand is the fact that even with me talking about this, I still sound as pretentious as the next guy. Now, I know what all of this sounds like. I know that there's someone who disagree. Okay. You know what? We'll get to that in a minute. Let's get back on track. Don't get stuck on tropes. Blah, 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 guts, blah, blah, repetitive. That type of repetitive storytelling is a show of bad writing, but we all know that. And to be honest, though, it's not something that should be completely shunned by new writers. I think that new writers should get that out. It's just you have to understand that when you do tell stories in that manner, you're not trying to be revolutionary. You're not... Okay, dang it, man. This is why this is such a hard topic. You're not a bad writer because your first script was blah, 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 guts, blah, repetitive. You're a bad writer when you continue to do that blindly without any credence to telling an actual story. Or if you're just trying to fit the social norms of we got to make the most money possible and we just need this film to have certain story beats. Boom, done. Here's $20 million, I guess. Well, I mean, to be honest, that sounds like something that I would be up for if I only have to just repeat the same lines in every movie over and over again and just get some money at the end of it. But hey, that's Hollywood for you. Maybe one element is okay. I mean, if you think about it, you're not going to escape genre. One of the people who was teaching me about writing was saying that you're never really going to escape putting your film into a category. The thing is, you just don't want to have your story not say anything. Of all the things that you could possibly take away from this podcast of me trying to explain something that even I just really never paid attention to. You have to understand, at the end of the day, your goal is to tell someone about something that you thought was cool. And in order to do that, you should primarily focus on just telling them that story. The rest of it, the brackets that the story fits into, how you structure your story and all of that, that's whatever. The main important thing that I preach religiously on this podcast is just write. Just write. Don't worry about where you want this thing to go up on. Leave all of that for the distributors. If you're distributing it yourself, then okay, yeah, maybe you can focus on that, but don't do it so heavily to the point where you hurt your own progress as a producer. You want to write. That's the reason why we got into being writers in the first place. I mean, you don't want to waste all of your time just thinking about all of these potential story beats, all these particular insert action, stab, wound, blood, gush, whatever. Here, you just want to tell everybody how you got to that point and where you're going from that point. Move on from it. I keep bringing up horror a lot, but really that's just the genre that I like, and it's just an easy genre to get into anyway. And the reason that it's so easy is because you're able to basically get away with any type of poor storytelling as long as you have some of the tropes and obviously, bikinis or, lewd teenage acts and comments or whatever. All of those things you can get away with. It's super cheap. You can shoot at any location. All you need is just some grainy filters and some weird sound stuff, and you got it. Maybe get a guy in a mask and a jumpsuit. All simple stuff. But I argue that because it was so easy in the past to do horror films, that now you have to focus on actually telling a decent story, because we're all yawning over here. Like, I mean, really, think about it. When's the last time you really enjoyed a horror movie? And if you did, other than, okay, don't bring up A24. We already know about A24. They did really good, especially with Hereditary. I love that film. And I don't think that anyone else would disagree, especially with, what's the other one called? Not Hereditary, but Midsummer. That's it. Yeah, those films are good. Really good art direction and definitely really good storytelling. But that's it though. Like, if you look at the script, there are indicators that this is what it's supposed to be. But you don't have to follow any particular, there has to be, some looming, oh, it's so evil, this and that. Just flow with it. People, I think that one of my biggest things when it comes down to genre, or specifically storytelling as a whole, is that the balance between good and evil, the lines there can be blurred. It's like you're not ever gonna have a story where someone's twisting the mustache, or someone's holding up the sword against the evildoer. You're not gonna have a situation where good versus evil is so blatant. It has to be different now. You have to blur those lines, and you have to blur them very, very, very well, because people already expect these things to happen. So subvert that. For me, I subvert it in my work by not even having explanations of who's good and who's bad. Characters show up and they do things, and you're looking at these characters wanting them to be good, but maybe they might do something bad. Then what? Okay, so this person is bad. But then someone beside them does something equally as bad. Whoa, okay, so is this person good? Are we supposed to root for this person? Now, what makes a person root for another person is having familial ties to that person. Something that the character is trying to achieve is we want to be able to write characters that are achieving goals that the audience would want to achieve. I think that's a good way to put that too. You know, in that way, we're creating a story where characters aren't labeled good and evil, but rather choices are being made. Have an argument with the characters in a story and put them on a spectrum. Don't put one as the protagonist and one as the antagonist. This person has to be evil, that person has to be good. No, instead ask a question and then have your characters answer that question. And how they answer that question should be on the scale of where you put them as per being against or for the argument you're trying to prove. And then when you do that, now your characters are coming together, your story's coming together. You're not having to worry about who said this, who said that. You do that and challenge them in the world with world building, and now you've got an entire story being told just based off of an argument that your characters are having. And then at the end of it, you can start putting in those little action bits where your character ends up doing this one thing and they touch something, and then the lights go out or something, and then there's a creature or something that arises because of the actions that the characters took. So now you're not necessarily rooting for a good guy or a bad guy. You're rooting for whoever you agree with. And I think that's part of it too. Especially when you add in that third chaos element, that monster or that storm or whatever happens that can't be controlled, the chaos of your argument. In that chaos, you should have the person that the story is trying to nudge towards, or maybe that the conflict that you're trying to nudge towards based off of your dilemma or your question or whatever. That's how you structure your story, and those action bits are what will ultimately define where they put your work as a genre. If it's a horror movie, obviously a ghost or a zombie or a demon or whatever, it'll put you in the horror spot. As a sci-fi, they're in space, they're in a lab, there's some technology involved, boom. Science, a science film, whatever. Or if it's just a romantic comedy, it's the same thing. These arguments are being made, but the tropes, they all can be, ignored in that sense. You're basically just telling the story and allowing people to come to their own conclusions. And I think that's really what every writer should be focused on doing. I can't say though, because I'm just my own version of a writer over here doing my own thing. I can't speak for everyone else, but to me, I feel more comfortable, especially in those regards to having decent stories. I feel like that's the way that it should be done. I feel like if we're more concerned about how our stories are working as opposed to the genre that they're supposed to be in, we're going to end up winning a lot more fans to our work. And we're going to end up winning a lot more prize money at these competitions. Okay, so I feel like I went on and on with that. But in conclusion, no matter how you approach your creative process, genre is just what you can claim when the work is finished. Just write the story, man. Just write the story, and don't worry about who's trying to define your work, or don't worry about defining your work yourself. Get the story written how you have it in your head, and whatever direction that you have for it after the fact, cool. Until then though, don't stress yourself over trying to be perfect in this stuff. Perfection is the mark of a fool who only sees themselves from a, I don't know, I can't say. Look, I'm okay. It's been a long month, and I don't know, man. This whole podcast thing is kind of new to me in the sense of me doing it myself. I made another recording about that if you want to listen to it. But I think a good takeaway from all of this is just don't overcomplicate the process. It all comes back to the same things, though. Continue to write. Uh, have a goal, and especially um, these days, you want to focus on one particular thing. You don't want to keep jumping from this thing to that thing just to try to fit some semblance of fame or whatever. You want to focus on just getting one part out. The way how I look at it, if you're writing and you're focused so much on trying to be in the spotlight that you're jumping from project to project, you're jumping from screenplays to novels without completing anything, then chances are you're just putting way too much effort into your ability that you just need to take a step back and really look at, where you're going. I had to do that. I recently had to do that because, again, I just keep trying to do everything. And when you try to do everything, obviously you can't master anything. And that's a big problem, especially when you have to come up with all of these different ideas and then try to execute them in certain ways. It becomes really discouraging when you look at yourself and look at what you've been doing and you don't have anything to show for it. So, like I said, don't worry about genre. Don't worry about a lot of this stuff. Just write. Focus on the things that you know, and then when you get to the point where you don't know, that's when you start defining, okay, let's go in here, let me ask somebody, let me put this stuff into certain spots and all of that whatnot. But until then, don't stress about it. No matter how you talk about genre, you seem just as pretentious as the next guy, and I believe that. No one can really define these things. You just have to roll with the punches, do what you can, put your work out there, and let what happens. As a writer, I just feel like there comes a point where you just have to accept the fact that maybe you're not going to be in Hollywood. Maybe you're not going to do, X, Y, or Z. You just have to do what you enjoy and let the chips lie where they fall. Honestly. Definitions aside, just don't worry about the audience. Don't worry about the content in the sense of where it should go. Will people get it? People, when you're a creator, that's one of the things that you kind of want to, have a knot in your stomach about. It's like, oh, I hope that people understand my work. Well, you're the one that wrote it. You spent the hours writing it. Don't worry about what other people think or say or, can get confused or whatever. You can help out in any way. You can learn things. You can learn to change your writing styles. But what matters is, are you enjoying yourself? Like, really? Are you enjoying what you're doing? When you wake up in the morning, are you excited about jumping into the next chapter? Are you excited about turning, or clicking over to the next page to continue your screenplay or whatever it is? You have to approach these things without the guise of perfection. Just get it done and put it out. Everything else is just what it is. All right, so coming up on the podcast, um, I really would like to do short stories. The thing, though, is that time is an issue with me, so that might not be for some time. Funny. I definitely would like to have some form of content other than me talking the entire time, though. My whole goal with the podcast was to do audio dramas, but that's just going to take a while. I have to find people to help me out with it. I have to learn, who I can work with in the space, and I'm hoping to look around and find people in the area that could help me, or somewhere online, because it's never really an excuse not to do anything these days. So I'm going to approach it with that mindset, and we'll just see what happens from there. In the meantime, I would like to put together some soundscapes. I think that would be cool. And I might do that as a live stream. Just basically build some spaces that I can work on at a later date, pertaining to those short stories or whatever. So we'll see. But I am excited about what I can do for the podcast. I definitely don't want to shirk any of my potential. So I'm not really going to concern myself with trying to fit into some social norms with my writing. And I think that's really what I was trying to say with this podcast. I have a terrible way of explaining things. But in either case, continue to write and continue to get things done. Don't concern yourself with things you can't control. And I'll definitely catch you guys later. This is Wesley the Writer, out. Man, I wish that this would just be good and done. I'm gonna have to go back and do some editing.